Welcome to Eviliv3, the live media streaming commentary show. Live media commentary show that answers the question, can aliens attack us using their butts? Subscribe if you're new to the channel because today we're reviewing Starship Troopers. Yeah, that's right. Not the movie. The book. And that's not a great thing because the film was wonderful, which made me want to read the book. And the book is... Initial thoughts are, it's good. It's all right. It's not the movie, but it's good. There's a lot in there that I actually really do enjoy. But I believe the novel is more known for controversy based on reviewer interpretation of the author's intentions and messages through the writing. So let's get into it really quick. And there's going to be a whole bunch of different covers of this because this was reprinted a ton. So it's by Robert A. Heinlein, written a few weeks in reaction to the U.S. suspending of nuclear tests, and it was first published as a 2-part serial in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction as Starship Soldier, and it was later published by G.P. Putnam's Sons on November 5th, 1959. It is not a long book. I think it's just under 300 pages, ish. It's quick to get through if you don't mind a slog of a read. And this was a slog of a read. And what do I mean by that? I mean, there are full chapters of just philosophy. And that's it. Like, I got into it thinking it was going to be like a military action story like the film is. No. There are isolated moments of military action, but the whole story is really, really different. So we'll get into it as I sort of address some of the notes here that I have. So this is set approximately 700 years after 1959. So this is clearly a reaction to what was going on in the world at the time of writing. And it's all set around this idea of an interstellar government, which is dominated by military elites called the Terran Federation. Basically, only veterans of the military can enjoy full citizenship in this new sort of governmental system, including the right to vote. Those who do not perform the service, which usually takes the form of military service, retain their rights of free speech and assembly, but they cannot vote or hold public office. And let me just start by saying, I like this idea. Like, I genuinely do. I think the problem with most of a citizenship in our republic, specifically the US, is that they're lazy. They don't want to even vote. They don't want to contribute to society. They just want to leech off of it. And I am not okay with that. I think if you're going to be in a society, you should actively work to better that society. Now, you can either do that through military service, and it doesn't have to be long. Like, I like what the Israelis do with 2-year service. But then Germany does a really great thing too, where they say, well, you don't have to do military service, but you have to do some public service. And that, I think, is the most important. Not only does it give you a little bit of perspective through experience, it also means you actually understand civic duty and your requirement to your fellow citizens and actually caring about the society that you live in. I think all of that's very important. So whether it's serving in a hospital, in a post office, or doing military service, I think everyone should have to do a minimum of 2 years service. And in this particular book, I believe it was 3 years or something like that they have to serve, or maybe it was 2. But I just finished it and I don't remember. That's how dead I am in the head. Anyway, so this structure arose ad hoc after the collapse of the 20th century Western democracies, driven in part by the inability to control crime and juvenile delinquency, particularly in North America. And then there's this massive war between an alliance of the United States, United Kingdom, and Russia, ironically, against the Chinese hegemony, which I would assume is like a lot of Asian nations joining together. It doesn't really go into a whole great amount of detail because it's not really important. It's what led to the democracy that they are now. So anyway, the story follows Juan Rico, or Johnnie Rico, a young man of Filipino descent, through his military service in the Mobile Infantry. And the Mobile Infantry is, I guess you could see it as sort of like the Marines, where it's like this special unit that wear, well, you see right here, they wear these sort of cyber almost like sort of like RoboCop style armor. They use like cyber suits, like mech warriors or something, but it's more form fitting power suits, and that's what they fight in. And the majority of maneuvering is just jumping. They just use the suits to jump great distances, and then from up above. It reminds me of playing Quake and Doom in multiplayer arena modes as a young man, where you would just sort of jump and then like aim down at the people you're jumping over and sort of pick them off in the video games. That's kind of what this is like. So, what are you gonna do? It's kind of silly when you think about it, kind of video gamey, but this was written way before video games. So maybe they stole it from this. Again, the majority of this is about Johnnie Rico's experience of military service. Like that's the sole focus, but it devotes entire chapters to discussions about philosophy and moral issues, including aspects of suffrage, civic virtue, juvenile delinquency, and war itself. So if you're really a socio-political sort of fan and you love to discuss philosophy, you're probably going to really dig this book. Me, I enjoy those things. I don't mind talking about them and I enjoy speaking to them, but I don't want to study them in a science fiction novel. I want to enjoy the science fiction fantasy of another universe where people do, war with aliens. Like that's the selling point of this. And so to be led in with this understanding of, well, this is what the movie's portraying, which is not, because it's just about, yes, it deals with a little bit of military service, but it's mainly just about them fighting the war against alien insects called Arachnids. And then this tight little friend group that sort of goes through the experience of war together. That's not this book. This book is very much just about Johnnie Rico and his experience. It does actually, there's some really dramatic changes aside from just the setting and stuff from the film, which I thought was interesting, is that the father didn't want him to sign up for service, but he did. And then his mother was on vacation. She ended up getting killed from an attack of the Arachnids. So the father signed up for service and they ended up serving together. And I love that idea. I think that's a very, very cool little serendipitous experience. And his father admits that he was kind of jealous that his son was going off to do something that when he was his son's age, he wanted to go do, but he was talked out of it by his father. And so to have them share this moment together of service, I just thought it was really kind of cool. All right. Anyway. So this criticizes the U.S. society of the 1950s, arguing that a lack of discipline led to moral decline, and it advocates corporal and capital punishment. I'm actually okay with that. My problem with the death penalty isn't the death part. My problem with the death penalty is our flawed justice system and the fact that we incarcerate and would potentially kill people who didn't actually commit the crime that they're being killed for. So we just have a justice system that is unjust. And that's why I don't like the idea of death penalties. But you get a convicted and confirmed like child murderer, rapist, or a general murderer, I have no problem with putting them down. That is, why should we have them in our society? And why should society then allow them to live without any problems in prison? And yes, I know that prisons have problems, but that's another part of the problem with justice system. Is it supposed to reform people or is it supposed to incarcerate people? Those are two different things. And so our entire system is flawed. And so I like it when you explore different solutions and variations on theme through science fiction. Hey, Chris, thanks for tuning in, man. So anyway, I don't mind corporal or capital punishment. I just mind that it's being done through a flawed system that we have. And you can make the argument that, well, our flawed system is better than anyone else's system, but that's not true when you look at how many people are murdered by our flawed system across our history for like no reason, because they didn't do the damn crime. And they're proven after death through DNA testing. So if we can ever get that solved and never have someone committed for a crime that they didn't actually do, then yeah, bring on the death penalty, because I don't want to have to pay for some criminal just to live. All right. the focus of this entire thing, the reason why the mobile infantry is a thing, is that there is aliens out there and they are vying for the same planets that we are as a species. Now, in this novel, we've actually gone to different planets and stuff and sort of colonized these different areas. And it's usually the other planets that sign up for the mobile infantry or the Navy, in order to fight and explore. But the reality is there's two different types of aliens in this. And I didn't know that. If just going off of the movie adaptation, there's only one, and that's the Arachnids. There's actually a totally different war with a totally different alien race that preceded the Arachnid War, and these were from an aliens they call the Skinnies or the Geezers. They're like these tall, thin, humanoid people. They don't really go into great detail explaining any of the aliens, really. They just sort of give broad generalities about, using words like geezers or skinnies or arachnids or bugs. But I thought it was really kind of cool that there's multiple aliens. And they didn't really, again, it's about the war through Johnny's eyes. So it doesn't really talk about the global situation, or not global, but the galactic, the interstellar situation, which sort of precedes it. They just sort of drop, I say they, but it was just Robert Heinlein, the author. They just give you a basic summary of lead up to why we're at war, because we're fighting for resources. And that's kind of it. It seems like it stops the focus on the Geezer War with the aliens, and it starts focusing on the pseudo-arachnids or the bug war. And that's where it really draws in the rest of humanity into this greater war. And that's where Rico's father and stuff gets involved in it as well. And I really loved the aspects that really hammered home his experience in basic training, because I went through basic training and there's a lot of similarities. It made me think that the author actually served. Well, I don't know if he did or not. Some of his military background information is very much real life. And so that felt really sort of familiar to me, and I really appreciated that. But he just goes into huge detail about the makeup of a unit and a battalion and a brigade and like stuff that has no bearing on the story. It's almost like he's showing off that he knows this stuff. And that's not fun to read. I don't like a chapter that's like 47 pages and it's talking all about like the military structural organization. How is that neat? I just don't understand why anyone would ever want to read that. Read a real military manual if that's what you're looking for. Don't pick up a sci-fi novel, because I want sci-fi. So that was a little bit frustrating. So like the first half of this book wasn't so bad to get through. The second half, and again, it's not a big book, it was a slog, because I had to fight through caring about all this military dump of information that they're throwing down on us. Anytime you had character interaction, that was great. That was interesting. I enjoyed that. But outside of that, it was very, very difficult to care about what I was reading in this novel. Needless to say, it won the Hugo Award for Best Novel in 1960. It's the novel's militarism and the fact that government service, most often military service, was a prerequisite to the right to vote in the novel's fictional society, led it to being frequently described as fascist. Which is not what fascism is. Yes, fascism has a focus on the military, but it's not structured this way. So I think it's just a way of people to dismiss this author's presumption about a potential future rather than the realities of what they're comparing it to, which is pretty similar to how people react to anything online nowadays. So why would it be any different back in the 50s? I don't know, in the early 60s. This is not a fascist novel at all. It does not promote the idea of fascism. It doesn't even really promote the idea of the government that it's set in, that the humans exist in. It just presents it as how they live. It doesn't try to sell you on it. I just happen to like the idea of having to do some form of service to your society. But it wasn't because I read this book and I was like, Mom, I need to be a fascist. That's ridiculous. No, you just want citizenry to care about the society and to have informed decisions rather than just emotional reactions when it comes to governance. At least I think that way. Maybe I'm clearly the minority, because most people don't vote and they don't care. Reviewers say that the terms used to describe the aliens were akin to racial epithets, which is ridiculous because I don't know any racist assholes calling any other ethnic or nationality skinnies or bugs. So I don't know where these people are getting these comparisons. I think people look for problems and then expound on the problems that they discovered and invented rather than actually recognizing a genuine problem. You know, like genocide in the Gaza Strip, for example. Oh man. But like I don't know. I think the reviewers of this novel in the day that it was written were still living under the fear of the Cold War, which globally we're still sort of, focused on, shockingly. But that's not what this novel is about. It's just about one dude going through military service fighting in an alien war. That's it. The problem with it is that it's too much about the military tactics and strategy. It really has this huge focus on math, which, I mean, math is okay. It's not my favorite subject. I'm not great at it, but I don't hate it. But why the hell is he focusing so much on math? It's weird. Like Rico he's going from enlisted service to being an officer, which means he has to sort of do a bunch of schooling and tests to become a commissioned officer. And we go through that studying with him. That's not fun. There's a war going on, and we're sitting in a classroom in the novel. Why? Skip over that part and get to the goddamn war. That's why we picked up the book. It's not called Starship Scholastics. It's called Starship Troopers, soldiers, fighting. Get in there and fight those bugs. I don't know. I was expecting the film. I know that most film adaptations are different from novels, but this is dramatically different. They took a lot of license. So I was a little bit disappointed because of that. My favorite part of this was Rico's experience in basic training and the war parts, which were very minimalistic. Maybe a third of the novel if you're really just wrapping it all up. Maybe even less than a third of the novel is the war. The rest is just his experience in the military system and basic training and life beforehand, which also isn't terrible. It's just the schooling stuff and the ad nauseum description of military structure is frustrating for me to read. Probably because I lived through it and I did not enjoy it, which is why I'm not in it anymore. But so that was my least favorite part. All in all, I gave this 3 out of 5 evil eyes. Look, it's a good book. It's a slog to get through part of it if you don't want to just focus on the military organizational side. If you're coming into this like I did from the film, you're probably not going to enjoy it as much as if you just picked up the novel in the time it was written and just enjoyed it, or the articles that it came out in the magazines. So not the best, but I'm glad I read it. I've actually owned it for years. I just never got around to reading it. I have so many books that I like buy because I'm an addict. So I buy a bunch of books, but I don't ever get around to reading all of them. And so I try to, slide them between other books that I read. When I see it on the shelf, I'm like, oh, I haven't read that yet. I better get to it. And that's kind of what this was. The movie is so much better. There's like sequels to the movie and cartoons and comics that I don't know anything about, so I can't vouch for those. But the movie, it felt like it was a vision of where we are right now in the world, sans the intergalactic alien war. But it felt like kind of nowadays, with internet and mobile devices and stuff, which I thought was kind of neat. But that's not in the book at all. And the movie has nothing to do with cybernetic uniforms, which is what the focus of the book is about. So, and again, the book doesn't really talk about him and his friends past the first, 10th of the novel. So it's very, very different. So don't go into it expecting it. But you should probably go into it because it's still interesting. And why not read an interesting novel nowadays? If the option is to stay on your mobile device and scroll through social media or read a novel, the answer should be clear. It's not, because most people go to the social media. But read the novels. It'll do you so much more good up here. Like, for real. All right. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Oh, what did you say about this? You thought the movie was a great example of military propaganda. Did the book focus on that as well? Not as much. No, not really. It presents their worldview, but it wasn't It wasn't like, join the Mobile Infantry. Would you like to know more? You know, that type of thing that the movie did. Not at all in the book. It just gives you background. It does focus whole chapters again on like philosophy and how the decline of the United States into the Federation that it exists at the moment of the book. But even that aspect of it is a little subdued. So anyway, that's all I got. Thank you all for tuning in. As always, like it or not, evil spelled backwards is live. So get out there, read more books, and be evil.